The first time the car appeared, Julia Vance had dismissed it as a glitch in the opulent matrix of her suburban life. It was a Rolls-Royce Ghost, a silvery titan of wealth, and it was parked on the meticulously manicured patch of lawn that abutted the deep end of her infinity pool. Not in the driveway, not on the street, but right up against the invisible boundary she and her estranged husband, Marcus, had fought over for years, the one where the pristine grass met the limestone pool deck. It was 7:15 a.m. on a Tuesday. Julia, dressed in tailored silk pajamas, was sipping her first espresso and staring out the panoramic window of the kitchen, enjoying the cool, quiet solitude of the early morning. The house, all glass and polished concrete, felt like a glamorous cage Marcus had built around her freedom, but she was learning to manage the bars. Then she saw the ghost. Its hood ornament, the spirit of ecstasy, looked like a defiant figurehead, pointing straight at her patio furniture. "What in God's name?" she muttered, her hand freezing halfway to the ceramic mug. She grabbed the nearest thing, a thick, unread copy of a quarterly finance journal, and strode out onto the deck. The car was immaculate, almost vibrating with expense. Its windows were tinted a non-negotiable black. There was no one visible inside. She walked around to the driver's side, feeling ridiculous, like a concierge dealing with an entitled idiot. She rapped sharply on the window. "Excuse me. This is private property. You need to move this now." Silence. Only the faint, almost imperceptible hum of the car's parked electronics. She tried the passenger door. Locked. She tried the driver's side. Locked. There was no license plate. Just a polished black square where it should have been. A cold spike of unease pierced through her annoyance. This wasn't a mistake. It was a deliberate act. Julia spent the next hour calling Marcus, her stomach twisting into knots with every unanswered ring. When he finally called back, his voice was clipped, hurried, and utterly devoid of concern. "The Rolls? Oh, that. Look, it's probably one of David Chen's new clients. Don't worry about it. He'll move it. David Chen, Marcus's business partner whose idea of a client meeting often involved high-stakes gambling and illegal liquor on a yacht. "Marcus, it's on the lawn," Julia hissed into the phone. "It's practically in the pool. There's no license plate and there's nobody in it." "It's insured," Marcus said, a familiar patronizing tone creeping in. "Just leave it, Jules. I'm in a meeting. We'll deal with it when I get home." The "when I get home" was a lie. They hadn't shared the same air in a week, despite still living in the same enormous house. A cold war of separate wings and silent meals. He hung up before she could argue. The daily ritual. For the next 3 days, the Rolls-Royce Ghost remained her unwelcome, silent neighbor. Julia tried everything. She called the local non-emergency police line. They politely informed her it was a civil matter on private property. She even considered having a tow truck pull it, but the sheer logistics and potential legal headache of touching a multi-$100,000 vehicle belonging to one of Marcus's associates made her hesitate. The car became a fixture, a monument to her lack of control. She found herself talking to it. "You know, you're ruining the feng shui," she said one afternoon, leaning against the French doors with a glass of Pinot Grigio. "But I have to admit, silver is your color." On the fourth morning, Friday, she noticed a change. The car was still there, but the faintest trace of steam was lifting from the hood. It had been running. Someone had been inside, and recently, that evening, the situation escalated from an annoyance to a genuine threat. Julia was home alone. The security system was armed. She was working on her dissertation in the glass-walled study when the lights suddenly flickered and died. A total power outage. Panic clawed at her throat. This neighborhood didn't have power outages. She fumbled for her phone and a flashlight. The air was thick with a silence broken only by her own ragged breathing. She moved slowly toward the kitchen, the beam of her flashlight dancing over the black granite counters. As she passed the large picture window overlooking the pool, the flashlight beam caught something moving in the darkness outside. It was a glint of polished silver. The Rolls-Royce, and beside it a faint, rhythmic glow. She crept closer to the window, pressing her face to the cold glass. The glow was coming from the driver's seat of the Rolls. It was the soft, blue-white light of a tablet screen. And it wasn't stationary. It was moving, scanning the house. Someone was in the car. Julia's heart hammered against her ribs. She backed away silently, retreating into the shadow of the hallway. She called Marcus again. Direct to voicemail. She grabbed the nearest weapon, a heavy brass fireplace poker, and retreated to the master bedroom, locking the heavy oak door behind her. She waited, poker in hand, for what felt like an eternity. After 20 agonizing minutes, the hum returned. The lights flickered back on. Outside, the Rolls was silent, still and dark again. The first clue, the incident transformed the car from a ridiculous problem into a terrifying presence. Julia didn't sleep that night. The next morning, determined and running on pure adrenaline, she put on her darkest sunglasses and a fierce resolve. She was going to confront the driver, or failing that, get solid proof of their identity. She marched out onto the deck and approached the Rolls. She noticed something she hadn't before, a tiny, almost invisible scratch on the driver's side door handle. It was fresh, silver metal exposed beneath black paint. She ran her hand along the window, then stopped. Tucked between the glass and the rubber weather stripping of the driver's side door was a single, small, rolled-up piece of paper. It was placed so deliberately it felt like an invitation, or a warning. With trembling fingers, she pulled it out. It was a note, folded twice, written on thick, expensive stationery. The words were a stark, unsettling command, written in bold, clean block letters. Julia Vance, you know where the money is. Move it, now. But Julia's blood ran cold. This wasn't about a parking spot. This was about something Marcus was involved in. Something that had found its way onto her lawn. And the handwriting, clean and deliberate, wasn't a threat. It was a deadline. The mention of the money solidified the terror. Marcus, a mid-level corporate finance VP, had a suspicious track record of short-term, large-scale loans and opaque investment ventures. She had always suspected he was playing a dangerous game, but this was the first concrete proof that the game had arrived at her doorstep. She frantically called Marcus again. He finally answered, clearly annoyed. I told you I'm at the club. Stop! She cut him off, her voice shaking. There was a note. And it mentioned the money, Marcus. What the hell is going on? Who is B? A tense silence stretched across the line. Marcus took a long, sharp inhale. Jules, listen to me. This isn't a joke. You don't know who this is. You need to get out of the house. Get a bag, don't take your phone, and leave. Go to your sister's. I'm not leaving until you tell me, she demanded, clutching the paper. Did you steal money? Is that what this is? Tell me! It's complicated. I didn't steal it. I invested it. It's a short-term liquidity issue, and B is just the enforcer. He's serious. If that car is still there, you are in danger, Jules. You have to move the briefcase. The briefcase. Marcus's ridiculous antique leather briefcase that he always kept locked in his private study safe. What's in it? Julia whispered. Just evidence of the deal. If he gets his hands on it, it's over for me. Maybe for you, too. I need you to get it and put it in the only place he can't get it. And where is that? Marcus's voice dropped to a barely audible rasp. The pool. You have to sink it, Jules, right under the deep-end buoy. Don't tell anyone. The sheer insanity of the command, sink a metal briefcase full of evidence in their perfect chlorinated pool, made her dizzy. But the terror in Marcus's voice was too real to ignore. She ran inside, her mind a frantic blur. The safe was behind a heavy painting in Marcus's study. She used the code he'd given her years ago, a joke about her birthday. The lock clicked. Inside, nestled on a velvet shelf, was the briefcase, old, heavy, and cold. The discovery Julia stood over the pool, the brass briefcase weighty and solid in her hands. The sun had shifted, and a bright reflection flared off the silver rolls. She felt a profound, terrible irony. Her life, her marriage, her safety. It all came down to whether she could sink a briefcase in a pool to save a man she barely recognized anymore. She looked at the car one last time. It was a perfect mirror, reflecting the sky, the water, and her terrified face. She raised the briefcase, ready to hurl it in, and then she saw it. It wasn't a reflection. It was a break in the silver paint, a slight imperfection in the polished surface of the driver's side door right beneath the window. A tiny circular lens, no bigger than a thumbnail. It was a camera. The car wasn't just a threat. It was a surveillance post. The driver wasn't just in the house. He was watching the house. He was watching her. Julia froze, the briefcase mid-air. She turned slowly, staring directly at the rolls. The tinted window was opaque, but she knew with cold certainty that whoever was on the other side was seeing her, holding the evidence, standing over the water. A wave of righteous, incandescent fury finally broke through her fear. She wouldn't play Marcus's game. She wouldn't sink the evidence. She would find out who B was, and she would use the evidence to save herself, not him, with a strength. This command appears to be a continuation signal. Since the user asked for a full, 5-part cinematic story, and I provided the hook in Part 1, I will now continue the narrative with Part 2. Part 2, the silver teacup, the pursuit, the deep. Resonant rumble of the Rolls-Royce engine was the soundtrack to Julia's panic. Beatrice wasn't just driving away. She was performing a measured, calculated exit, emphasizing that she had won the initial exchange. The massive car, now raised on its specialized suspension, navigated the driveway with slow, arrogant grace. Julia didn't wait to see it reach the street. Her focus snapped from the ruined car panel to the gleaming prize on the deck, the antique briefcase. A decoy, Beatrice had purred. The money is in the silver teacup. Julia scrambled past the dented chaise lounge, adrenaline overriding the shock. The briefcase lay on the limestone, heavy and menacing. She didn't bother trying to open it. She now knew it was a carefully planned distraction, a prop in a stage-managed confrontation designed to test her loyalty, or worse, confirm her compliance with Marcus's frantic command. Her fury at Marcus for the lies, the danger, and the sheer theatrical stupidity of the sink the briefcase instruction was a cold, driving force. She burst through the sliding glass doors and into the cool, silent interior of the house. The teacup. It was in the antique mahogany breakfront in the formal dining room, a piece of old family history that had always felt wildly out of place in Marcus's sleek, minimalist palace. The cabinet was locked. Julia's hands were shaking too hard to operate the delicate key she knew was hidden in a sugar bowl on a high shelf. Instead, she grabbed the brass fireplace poker she'd wielded earlier. One swift, desperate swing shattered the glass panel on the breakfront door with a deafening crash. Reaching past the jagged edges, she snatched the small sterling silver teacup, a Victorian piece, etched with delicate forget-me-nots. It was heavier than it should have been. The base felt solid, weighted. She turned it over and saw a minute seam where the pedestal met the bowl. She twisted the base. It didn't budge. She twisted harder, her fingers slipping on the polished silver. Finally, with a metallic groan, the base separated. Inside, nestled in dark velvet, wasn't cash. It was a single, high-density USB drive and a sheaf of micro-printed paper. The paper, when unrolled, contained a series of encrypted account numbers and names. The USB drive, however, felt like the real weapon. As she stared at the damning evidence, a realization struck her. Marcus hadn't called her to save himself. He had called her to destroy the evidence, to sink the briefcase while the real evidence, the teacup, was safe, hidden in plain sight. He was using her as an unwitting accomplice to his escape, not his rescue. The bitter taste of total betrayal was sharp and immediate. She shoved the USB and the paper into the deep pocket of her silk robe. Now she had to move. Beatrice had mentioned a meeting with Marcus. If that Rolls-Royce reached its destination, wherever that was, Julia's brief window of advantage would slam shut. The trapped house, Julia ran to the garage, determined to use her own car to catch Beatrice. As she hit the button for the main garage door, the house lights flickered again, followed by the high-pitched, insistent shriek of the security system alarm. Security breach! Access point Alpha! A recorded male voice, Marcus's voice, calm and controlled, boomed from the internal speakers. Marcus! she spat. You absolute bastard. She realized with sickening clarity that the power outage yesterday, the flickering lights, the car alarm, it wasn't Beatrice testing the security. It was Marcus, who had initiated a remote lockdown sequence the moment he realized Julia was no longer playing his game. The heavy, steel-reinforced garage door remained stubbornly shut. A green LED above the garage entrance was blinking, indicating a system override. She was locked in. She frantically checked her phone. No signal. Marcus must have activated a localized cell jamming field, another expensive toy he'd installed to protect his privacy. Her only option was the front door. She punched in the code, but the keypad flashed red. Lockout active. She was trapped inside the glass cage. And Beatrice, the cool, composed orchestrator, was getting a 5-minute head start. Julia had to use the one exit Marcus had overlooked, the service entrance to the pool house, which led to a side gate used by the landscapers. She ran through the house, the briefcase still lying like a forgotten monument on the deck. As she reached the pool house, she glanced out the window and saw the Rolls-Royce finally pull onto the street. Beatrice paused, just for a beat, and then the car's brake lights flashed, not a stop, but a brief, arrogant salute. The hidden tracker. Reaching the pool house, Julia shoved the key into the service door. It clicked open. She was through. The side gate was just 10 feet away, a simple latch and chain. She fumbled with the clasp, her muscles screaming with effort and frustration. Click. Free. She ran out onto the suburban street, her silk pajamas wildly inappropriate for a high-speed chase. She looked down the road. The silver Rolls was gone, swallowed by the morning traffic. No, 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 she whispered, leaning against a neighbor's pristine mailbox. She needed to know where Beatrice was going. Her mind raced, sifting through the conversation, the clues, the context, the car. The ghost wasn't just transport. It was a complex surveillance hub. Marcus was in corporate finance. His associates would use the best, most discreet tracking money could buy. The Rolls-Royce wasn't hers, but Marcus had listed it as property of Vance Estates. That meant it was on their books. And if it was on their books, Marcus, or someone associated with him, had access to its telemetry. She bolted back into the garage through the now unlocked service door. She ran to the workbench, Marcus's private tinkering area, rarely used, always pristine. She knew he had a backup laptop for his dirtier transactions, disconnected from the main home network. It was under a drop cloth. She threw the cloth off and powered the laptop on. The screen sprang to life, displaying a login page for a high-end corporate vehicle fleet management system, Marcus's digital escape hatch. She typed in the only password she knew he'd trust. Her maiden name, access granted. The screen filled with a complex satellite-mapped interface. One vehicle was highlighted in bright green, Vance Estates Asset 403G, the Rolls-Royce Ghost. The car icon was moving steadily toward the city center, away from the wealthy suburban enclaves and toward the financial district's towering glass. Its current destination, highlighted by a red waypoint, the Olympus Tower. The Olympus Tower was the impenetrable fortress of David Chen, Marcus's partner. Chen was the whispered name in the dark corners of every investment party, the money launderer, the silent majority owner, the truly dangerous one. Beatrice wasn't meeting Marcus at a hotel bar. She was delivering him, or the news of his failure, directly to the man who signed the checks and broke the kneecaps. Julia grabbed the laptop. It was light, designed for travel and the car keys from the hook. She punched the garage door code. This time, the door groaned, rose, and gave her freedom. The race to Olympus, slamming her sleek, black Mercedes sedan into reverse, Julia backed out of the driveway, the laptop open on the passenger seat, the green tracking dot on its screen, her only guide. She didn't slow down to assess the damage to the Rolls. She drove with a reckless abandon she hadn't felt since her college days. She had the USB. The knowledge and a 3-minute lead on Beatrice's arrival at the Olympus Tower, given the Rolls' stately pace and her own aggressive driving, The drive was a blur of weaving through early morning commuters. As she sped down the freeway, she risked a glance at the micro-printed paper from the teacup. It was a partnership agreement. Marcus Vance, David Chen, and a third party listed only as B.K. Thorne, Beatrice K. Thorne. She wasn't an enforcer. She was a partner, a major investor, or perhaps the one who truly held the power. Her meeting wasn't an interrogation. It was a hostile takeover. The city skyline loomed ahead, the Olympus Tower the sharpest, most arrogant needle on the horizon. She began to read the fine print of the partnership agreement, dictated by the flickering light of the laptop. The deal was complex, involving offshore holding companies and distressed asset acquisition, a polite name for stripping the wealth of dying companies. The key detail was on the final page, a small paragraph concerning a termination clause. If any partner was found to have misappropriated funds exceeding $5 million, the other partners were entitled to seize all their personal and corporate assets, and the breaching partner would be subject to a penalty clause that was chillingly vague, but implied physical harm. Marcus's frantic demand to sink the briefcase now made perfect sense. He hadn't just invested the money. He had likely skimmed the $5 million threshold, and the briefcase held the evidence of his breach. The teacup held the evidence of the entire scheme, which meant he was desperate for both to disappear. Suddenly, the voice of the GPS on the laptop crackled to life, overlaying the vehicle tracking system. Rolls-Royce Ghost, Asset 403G, is stationary. Destination reached. Arrival time 07:48 a.m. Julia checked her clock. 7:46 a.m. She had 2 minutes. She slammed the Mercedes off the freeway ramp and plunged into the gridlock of the financial district. She could see the Rolls parked in the valet drop-off of the Olympus Tower, a silver beacon of expensive trouble. Beatrice was just stepping out, coolly handing a key to a white-gloved attendant. This command is the signal to continue the story. I will now write the third part of the 5-part cinematic narrative. The silence in the executive elevator was thick, sterile and punctuated only by the smooth, terrifying rush of air pressure changing as they ascended the final floors of the Olympus Tower. Julia stood opposite Beatrice Thorne, the small black USB drive feeling incandescently hot in her pocket. Beatrice's initial shock had instantly hardened back into controlled fury. Her eyes never left Julia's face, cold and dissecting. "You have no idea what you're holding, Julia," Beatrice said, her voice dangerously low. "That drive is not your life insurance. It's your death sentence. Give it to me now, and I promise you a clean exit. Marcus will be dealt with, and you can disappear." Julia met her gaze, remembering Marcus's cowardly use of her. The fear was still there, but it was now dwarfed by a blinding rage. "You and Marcus played a sick game on my lawn," Julia countered, her own voice remarkably steady. "You wanted me to destroy the evidence. Why? Was it just a test to see if I was a loyal idiot, or was Marcus trying to set me up to take the fall?" Beatrice gave a tight, humorless smile. "Marcus is resourceful but sloppy. He misappropriated over $6 million, enough to trigger the termination clause. He was trying to get you to dispose of the briefcase, the evidence of the breach, while he secured the real leverage, the teacup. He was going to walk into David Chen's office, claim ignorance of the missing $6 million, and use his access to the rest of the accounts on that drive to cut a new deal, selling us out in the process. So I wasn't the pawn. I was the cleanup crew," Julia murmured, the full weight of the betrayal settling in. "And you, Beatrice, you parked that silver eyesore by my pool for days, not to intimidate, but to establish a psychological pattern, to make the sink it command seem like the only rational choice under duress. You wanted me to believe I was saving Marcus when I was actually destroying your competition's insurance policy. A beautiful car is an excellent tool for misdirection," Beatrice agreed, her tone shifting to professional admiration. "Now give me the drive and we can forget this ever happened. Your involvement ends here. You don't want to be present for the end of Marcus Vance." "I absolutely do," Julia said. "I'm not leaving until I see justice. And since I have the real collateral, I get to write the terms." The elevator gave a final, gentle ding. The doors slid open onto a breathtaking panorama, the entire penthouse floor, a vast space of smoked glass, black marble, and minimalist furniture. Dominating the view was a single, immense mahogany desk. Behind the desk sat David Chen. He was a man of quiet, massive authority, impeccably dressed, with a gaze that suggested he was always calculating something far more complex than the conversation at hand. Standing opposite him, pale and visibly trembling, was Marcus Vance. Marcus looked like a trapped animal, his expensive suit rumpled, his usual arrogant composure completely gone. The negotiating table. The moment the elevator doors opened, all eyes snapped to the unexpected duo. Marcus's jaw dropped. "Julia, what the hell are you doing here? I told you to leave!" David Chen merely raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow, a gesture that conveyed both confusion and intense annoyance. "Beatrice, I asked you to be discreet," Chen said, his voice flat, dangerously devoid of inflection. Beatrice stepped out of the elevator first, smoothly transitioning into her role as the powerful partner. "My apologies, David, we had a slight complication. It appears Mrs. Vance misinterpreted the terms of her husband's instructions regarding the collateral." She moved toward Chen, expecting Julia to hang back. Julia didn't. She walked right past Beatrice and approached the massive desk, planting her hands on the cold marble surface. "I didn't misinterpret anything." "Marcus," Julia said, her eyes locked on her husband. "You didn't want me to save you. You wanted me to cover up your $6 million theft from your partners so you could negotiate your way out of the termination clause. You used me to try and destroy the evidence of the overall scheme." Marcus looked like he was about to faint. "Julia, please don't say anything." "Too late," Julia snapped, turning to face Chen. "Mr. Chen, I have the actual evidence of the entire scheme, the partnership agreement and the digital accounts. Marcus only had the evidence of his own breach. I am here to negotiate my own settlement." Julia pulled the USB drive from her pocket and tossed it onto the desk. It skittered to a stop just inches from Chen's hand. David Chen didn't look at the drive. He looked at Julia. "You are an amateur, Mrs. Vance. You have walked into a very dangerous room with a very powerful piece of data. That drive has only two values here, leverage or trash. The moment it leaves your possession, you become disposable." "I agree," Julia said, holding his gaze. "That's why I haven't given it to you. This is a read-only drive, Mr. Chen, and I've already sent a copy of the encrypted files to a high-security offshore account. If I don't confirm my safety via an authenticated text message within the next 30 minutes, the full decrypted contents of this drive, including your involvement, Beatrice's and Marcus's specific illegal transactions, will be forwarded automatically to the federal regulators, the SEC, and 3 major investigative news outlets." Beatrice took an involuntary step back. "That's a lie." "Test me," Julia challenged. "You know Marcus's tricks. He taught me a few. This drive is worthless if I'm dead, Mr. Chen. The insurance policy isn't on the drive, it's on me. And the clock is ticking." A palpable silence fell over the penthouse. Marcus was now simply staring at his wife, a mix of horror and grudging admiration on his face. He had tried to use her as a scapegoat. She had turned his methods against his enemies. David Chen, however, showed a flicker of respect. He slowly picked up the USB drive, turning it over in his fingers. "A counteroffer," Chen said, his voice now almost conversational. "You give me the decryption key, and Beatrice will guarantee your full personal wealth. The house, the savings, the investments that aren't tied up in Marcus's deals. You leave right now, and you never speak of this again. A clean divorce, a clean life. Marcus, however, will face the consequences of the termination clause, the terms of justice." Julia considered it for a long, agonizing moment. It was everything she had wanted: freedom, security, and Marcus's ruin. It was the perfect escape, but something held her back. The silver car, the terrifying confrontation, Marcus's calculated betrayal, it demanded more than mere escape. It demanded accountability. "No," Julia said, shaking her head. "That's Marcus's deal. This is mine. Marcus stole $6 million from you. He used a shell company registered to the Vance estate's name. I want 2 things." She looked straight at Marcus. First, I want every dollar of that $6 million returned. Not to you, Mr. Chen, but directly to the accounts of the small, legitimate investment firms Marcus was bleeding dry to fund his own illegal transactions. I have the account numbers from the microprint paper inside the teacup. Marcus opened his mouth to protest, but a glare from Chen silenced him instantly. Second, Julia continued, turning back to Chen and Beatrice, I want the Rolls-Royce Ghost, registered solely in my name with no liens and no tracking devices. You kept it on my property for 4 days to intimidate me. Now it's my compensation for the stress and the damage to my lawn. The request was absurd, audacious, and profoundly ironic. Beatrice's face was a mask of cold fury. My car? Beatrice hissed. Absolutely not. Your asset, Julia corrected. One that Marcus listed under Vance Estates. A material asset that signifies the end of this arrangement. It proves you complied with my terms, and it's the only physical thing I walk away with that isn't traceable back to this scheme. It's my souvenir. You get the decryption key. I get the ghost and a clear conscience. David Chen put the USB down and leaned back in his leather chair. He regarded Julia, a flicker of genuine predatory amusement in his eyes. You know, Marcus, Chen said to the pale man standing across from him, your wife has more nerve in her pajamas than you have in your entire career suit. She's also far more dangerous. He looked at Beatrice. The car is a negligible loss. It has served its purpose. Do it, Beatrice. Draw up the papers. We need that drive. Beatrice swallowed, the forced loss of her silver status symbol clearly painful. Understood, David. The signed confession Marcus, seeing his entire world crumbling and his life dependent on his wife's quick thinking, finally found his voice. Julia, thank you, he stammered. You saved me. You saved us. Don't, Julia said, holding up a hand. I didn't save you. I saved myself, and I made sure the people you hurt got their money back. I'm done being part of your mess. Beatrice, moving with efficiency, was already on the phone, directing her legal team to draft a set of non-disclosure agreements and the title transfer documents for the Rolls-Royce. Julia stood her ground, watching the final humiliating moments of her husband's scheme unravel. After 10 tense minutes, a secure printer in the corner of the penthouse whirred to life, spitting out several pages. Beatrice took them to the desk. Sign here, Beatrice commanded, pointing to the transfer of property section for the Rolls-Royce. And here, confirming you received the settlement funds for the other accounts. Then you provide the key, and you leave. Julia signed her name, her hand steady. Marcus watched silently as his wife signed over his.